All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to the first Club Olas National event. We are here today to hosting our Club Olas Social Impact Panel with two amazing panelists I'm very excited to introduce. But before we begin that, I would like to welcome to our Zoom stage the founder and CEO of Project Olas, Rebecca Cox.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm so glad you're all here. It's a great turnout. I was talking before the meeting that Club Olas was just an idea a couple months ago, and Project Olas was just an idea maybe like 4 months ago. So this is really a surreal thing, and I couldn't ask for more wonderful people to have speaking for us tonight. Both Professor Moreno and Professor Acosta are like, I'm just really, really excited to hear what they have to say. Professor Moreno specifically, I remember going around the Georgetown Spanish floor trying to find a teacher who'd be interested in Olas, and Professor Moreno was just immediately like, wow, that's what I want to do. I love that. I'm really excited. So this is really a cool moment for Olas, and it's one for the books. So yeah, that's Noel, should I explain Olas a bit, or do you think everybody here kind of understands what Olas does?
Yeah, could you give an overview of our mission, Project Olas?
Sure, of course. So Project Olas, we employ moms in vulnerable Central American communities as Spanish language tutors via WhatsApp. So we deliver this high impact Spanish learning to you that's cross-cultural in a way that most Spanish tutoring services just can't achieve. Like a lot of the time we're with cross-cultural education, we're speaking with somebody who is of the same socioeconomic status as us and has a similar life experience, at least in that way. With Olas, we break through every barrier possible to have you speak with somebody who you otherwise would never have the chance to meet unless you did specific volunteer work in the Guatemala City garbage dump. So that's what we do. I hope that was a good explanation. Well, feel free to add anything if you want to. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca. And it's so wonderful to be here, to be able to be united by our parent organization, Project Olas. And like I said, this is an event from the Club Olas National Network, a huge community nationwide of students who are passionate about social impact and language learning. Before we kick off, I do ask everyone to turn off their cameras, since we just want to be able to really spotlight our speakers and simulate a webinar experience. But my name is Noelle Whitman. I'm the director of Club Olas. I oversee all 12 chapters of Club Olas chapters nationwide, and I'm also the president of the Georgetown chapter of Club Olas. I'm very excited to be hosting this event with my best president, who will be introducing herself in a moment, and I'm a junior at Georgetown University.
Hi, yep, just like Noelle said, I'm Sarah. I'm the Vice President at Georgetown University, and it's been such an honor to be able to put on this event with Noelle and our amazing speakers we were able to get for tonight. So before we get started, I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more about Club Olas. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Club Olas is a national network of college and high school students that are brought together by our shared goal of social impact and language learning. And just like Rebecca mentioned, we're under the organization of Project Olas, and we are really just aimed at furthering the mission of Project Olas. So the Olas moms are at the center of both our mission and Project Olas mission. And with that, we want to try to help cause change and impact in these women's lives, which is exactly what we want to talk tonight about, which is social impact and sociolinguistics. And this is just the beginning of our programming we're going to be doing as Club Olas and our national network. So please stay tuned for more interesting things that'll be coming your way. So before I pass it on to Noelle to start the event, I want to go over our Q&A we're going to be having towards the end of the event. This will be a just typical Q&A, but we're asking that you either privately message me or text me with your questions. You can do this at any point during the panel, no need to wait till the end, but I'm just gonna be feeding them to Noelle in an orderly fashion. So that's why we ask that you kind of direct them to me rather than putting them in the chat as a whole. I'll be putting all this information in the chat, so no need to remember it. And also when we are doing the Q&A, there's no need for you to turn on your video or talk. So if you're not comfortable with that, I again will just be giving those questions to Noelle and she'll be communicating. We just ask that you give your name and what school so that we can spotlight your question. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Noelle to go ahead and start our event.
Thank you, Sarah. And so it's my honor to introduce our two panelists. We're very excited to have you in conversation about really the heart of Project Olas Social Impact and Spanish language learning. And our first panelist is Diana Acosta. Originally from Washington, D.C., Diana has had 10 years of youth and community engagement experience alongside Latinx communities. She worked with the Phillips Brooks House Association as program director of the Key Latch youth programs and launched a post-secondary education access program for DC public school families in partnership with the Latin American Youth Center. And so currently she serves on the Vine Core Youth Program's Board of Directors, and she supports the coordination of the organization's enrichment program. She received her BA in sociology with a secondary degree in ethnicity, migration, and rights from Harvard University, and she's currently obtaining her master's degree in education policy also at Harvard University. So we're very excited to have you here to discuss more about social impact, how it pertains to Latinx communities and youth and beyond. And our second panelist is María Moreno. María works on critical discourse analysis and Spanish sociolinguistics, and her particular academic interests lie in language and national identity, political discourse analysis, and media representation as it relates to language. And she is a professor at Georgetown University's Department of Spanish and Portuguese. She teaches courses on Spanish sociolinguistics, advanced level Spanish, as well as community-based learning classes. And I've been lucky enough to have taken 2 of her courses in my years at Georgetown, and her goal in teaching critical sociolinguistics is social change for the common good. So we're very, very excited to have both of you here, and I will kick it off to the both of you to introduce yourselves before we dive into the heart of our conversation.
All right. Hi, everyone. So thank you so much, Noelle, for that beautiful introduction. I'm actually very excited to speak with you all today. I'm Central American myself. I am a 1.5 generation immigrant and moved here with my family when I was 8 years old. So I have very close ties with my Salvadoran roots and have grown up in a really strong Central American community here in DC. So I'm really looking forward to learning with you all today and learning from Dr. Moreno and everyone else at Olas. So I appreciate you all for having me tonight.
And I also want to thank you, Noelle, for the very nice introduction and for inviting me to this event. I'm so excited for Project Olas, really excited. So I'm happy to be here and talk about all these topics that are my obsession. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, both of you. And so we're very excited to have this conversation about the intersection of social impact and Spanish sociolinguistics, but we really wanted to delve into those concepts, make sure that all of our audience members have a full understanding of these really interesting fields. And social impact is such a common buzzword nowadays, but not always fully explained. And organizations like us at Project Olas have social impact driven missions, but I'd love for Diana, for you to define what social impact is. What importance do you think it holds for students who are learning about this, but really for the larger global community?
Yes, for sure. So firstly, this is a very huge question, very important one too. I think in my years of direct service experience and reflections and trying to really see where my role fits in creating change, I've come up with this question many times. And I really think that whether you're speaking about social impact, social justice, or the intersection of both, the key word for me has always been social. So in community, alongside other people, with others, it's the work that Olas and other organizations like it are doing is so massive, and one that's tied to a really long history, both in the US and outside. And so I think that takes a lot of community. It takes a lot of us to come into that conversation and to act on our words and to act on our missions. And so I really do believe that social impact and social justice are defined per community based on their needs, based on their voice, based on what they hope to get out of the space. And so you know, the remaining factor in that conversation has always been the social and the community, and letting that be a partnership along the way. So and again, it's a very complex, and it really depends on what is needed in the space. But I really do believe in that alongside and working with, as opposed to working for, when we're defining what social impact could look like for a certain space.
I love that you brought up the community aspect. I think that's so integral, and I think very much a priority at Project Olas, where we are working in partnership with the community of Zona 3 in Guatemala City. So I'm so glad that you were able to touch upon the community aspect. And then to direct it to you, Maria, about sociolinguistics, your examination of the intersection of language and politics and culture has always been so fascinating for me as I've taken your classes. But could you share with us what sociolinguistics is, and specifically how that field informs your understanding of both the Spanish language, but also Latin America at large?
Yeah, sure. So social linguistics is that in the study of that intersection that you mentioned, language, society, power, discourse, all these issues. And as academic field is it's a very broad field. It has many things inside the discipline of social linguistics. Everything is loosely connected with this idea of, you know, the nexus between language and society. But how I define sociolinguistics, what is sociolinguistics for me specifically, has to do, there is this famous quote by Karl Marx that say, actually it's inscribed in his tomb, his headstone. It says that philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways, but the point, however, is to change it. And that is me. I mean, one thing is social linguistics, that, you know, describing how language and society interact. And another thing is critical social linguistics, that you know, is more focused on the idea of changing and impacting and understanding how we can use this knowledge about the intersection between language and power, language and oppression, to subvert the status quo. And yeah, for me, I mean, my students know for sure social linguistics is in everything. Like, you know, it's key to understanding how the world works, how we live, how we experience this world, the ideologies that we hold as essential truths. And it's, you know, you get up in the morning and you are already in relationship with your language in the moment that you open the mouth and you say good morning. So language is used for many things. It's used for communicating many implied meanings at the individual level, but also at the social level. And language and discourse are how we organize our society, and our understanding of society is mediated through discourse and language. So I guess studying social linguistics is just like opening that window for understanding the world, and it's an efficient lens, you know, to understand how things and systems work.
Thank you. I've always found it so fascinating, because I think as a student studying Spanish, I went into Georgetown thinking language is a much more like individual experience, when really it's a much larger community-based language learning. But then you get even further where it's looking at structures and seeing how language permeates through it. It's always been really fascinating. Diana, do you ever feel like language is something that social impact field delves into or doesn't give recognition enough? What's the balance like for that?
100,000% for sure. Everything that Professor Moreno said was everything I've seen in my youth work. I think with my high school students, their families, their identity and the linguistics association with that are super important and vital and even empowering. And I think that, you know, when my kids are speaking Spanglish, or they, you know, switch from one language to another, you can just see, you know, the intersections of the experiences they've had. And you know, our recently arrived youth, they speak mainly Spanish, and they come with a whole notion of what it's meant to grown up in their space, and you know, and come to a whole new different one. So I think it's visible and it's super important, and we actually use it in curriculum to ensure that they have ownership and voice within the space.
I think that's so important, the talking about ownership and creating spaces where voices are really heard. I think that's something we've talked a lot about and considered in Project Olas, how our mission is centering on empowering women from vulnerable Central American communities, and how we really want to be uplifting their voices and creating leadership positions that often haven't been filled by community members, women themselves. So to be able to see them reflected in those leadership positions have been incredible in creating this like ripple effect on the community. But specifically like for female voices and being able to uplift those, what unique role do you think women have in social impact and creating this like community-based change? And this is for both of you. Anyone can take it.
I don't know, Diana, do you want to go ahead or?
Go ahead, Professor, you could go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just reflecting on this idea of social impact when you started talking about it. And obviously for me, as you know, my identity, a big important part of my identity is being a professor and teaching, being a teacher. So I believe education is social impact at its best. No, it's how I impact the world through my students, through the perceptions and understandings of my students. But I believe women and marginalized communities should be at the center of that education and that understanding of the world. And that's why my pedagogical approach is centering their voices, voices that have been historically silenced, erased from the table, silenced, ignored, and that silencing is exactly, it has a goal. It's for the sake of preserving the repressive hierarchies. Obviously, for me, reflecting about my role and in this social impact adventure, it is I need to see who I am and where do I work. I mean, I work at Georgetown University, and my positionality in the world, it's so important. No, it is a place of privilege and power, Georgetown University. Therefore, bringing marginalized communities to the center stage can be very subversive. I mean, it's not the typical classroom next door in ICC or any other buildings in campus, or now on Zoom somewhere in the air. The classes, the type of classes that are typical are classes that are just making sure that we have successful agents of the system in the future, like people who are gonna be, extending this system. But I think real education is subversion. Real education is liberating minds from oppression, and only subverting the system we can liberate ourselves from oppression. And I say ourselves because we are part, even as privilege, the privileged side of the balance. We are part of this oppression system. So yeah, that is how I see the marginal communities in my approach. They are not marginal, they are centered, and that's why I like Olas. And I will, if I have a chance, to explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I would like to add onto Professor Moreno's comments, on the just like personal experience and also professional experience. Really, acknowledging that women in a lot of these communities hold so much just wisdom and power. Like, I can only think of my family as like all the women and the grandmas and the wisdom that's been passed down from generation to generation that, like Professor was saying, gets erased, like in textbooks, in educational spaces, or doesn't get highlighted, or, you know, doesn't get represented in different spaces. And so I think that, at least in my experience, all my young women, like, not, it's not even just about centering women, centering girls, centering like the whole experience, from young to older, and really ensuring that like they feel like they can change the world and really be out there and doing the work, whether or not they see themselves at the moment. And so that's actually something that that we try to do with our work with young people, is ensuring that even from a young age, even our middle schoolers can get peer guidance from the high school students, and really see that power that they have, even navigating like systems of oppression against women and violence against women, which is something that a lot of our communities experience. And so I think that being able to center that wisdom that is passed down is really vital in implementing, you know, curriculum or programs, or into bringing voices into the space.
I think that generational aspect is so fascinating, because we don't realize how much of like our families are able to like transmit this generational wisdom, and especially being able to tap into those resources with conversations through Project Olas have been fascinating, because you're talking to an Olas mom, but she's carrying that wisdom of generations and generations past. And we think of Club Olas as really being able to bring together this diverse array of students and moms who have these backstories and this perspective that they can share with one another, and that relationship they build is the foundation of language learning through our organization. And so I think we were starting to like delve into that, but what do you think about cross-cultural connection, not just like in a learning environment, but specifically in just social environments too? With Diana, you were mentioning creating curriculum for young people. How do you see like the different identities coming together, interacting, creating cross-cultural understandings with one another? Does that have an importance? I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the first things that we try to think about in programming development and curriculum development, is thinking about what is not only effective curriculum or curriculum that focuses just on outcomes or outputs, but really incorporating like a narrative of empowerment and really addressing other parts that our youth will navigate, right? They're not just with us, or we're not the only ones they see during the day, right? They navigate school, they navigate public spaces. And so how do we incorporate different elements that they can use as toolkits or tools outside of our space, to continue learning outside the, you know, the traditional school setting? And so the cross-cultural is key, because we also have students who identify from other spaces. And so creating those dialogues between them only helps them grow. So much research shows, you know, racial ethnic identity is super crucial to youth development, and to actually relate a lot of relations to like linguistics. And so I think for me, that has meant really incorporating youth voice along the way. And a lot of programs say, you know, we'll do youth voice, and maybe it's like a one survey situation. And, you know, we always push for, how do youth have a say in our organization? You know, we always try to have youth on the board so that they are also making big decisions with us. And I think that that is indicating that youth power is essential, and that we value them not just as participants, but as collaborators in creating a space that's for them, especially with their varying experiences, right? Even if we have kids from Central America, they might have different experiences from different towns or from different situations that they've been. So I think it's cross-cultural, cross-collaboration, and really being able to give up a little bit of power and give up a seat, right? Or give up a space so that they can lead and navigate that, and really value their wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, cross-cultural connections for me it's you know, it's extremely important. It's for my pedagogical approach. And that is one of the reasons, I mean, being so fundamental for my philosophy as a professor. That's why I was immediately attracted to what Rebecca was telling me in my office some months ago, very recently, even though it seems like ages, but it was very recently, sometime in early spring, no? Why I was so attracted and why I felt like this is the future of my class, no? Because I think that there is this very, very exciting idea about these dynamics in Olas of intimacy and distance at the same time. The idea of being able to talk to a person from your personal space and that other person, a mom, in her personal space, and talk about very, you know, intimate things, private conversations, whatever you feel like talking, but with this distance, geographical for sure, but also identity distance and social distance. It's very cool. It's really interesting. And for me, when I'm planning to, you know, integrate Project Olas as part of my social linguistics class next semester, and for me, Ola moms are gonna be co-teachers. They are the ones, you know, who will have the voice of authority. They know what they are talking about when we talk about power, oppression, marginalization, gender, and most of the times in our US world, and everywhere, but specifically for my students and even myself, most of the ideas, messages that we receive from or about others, other people, are mediated. They are, you know, we acquire this knowledge via the media or, you know, academic studies or popular media even, but there is always this mediation. And what is cool in Olas is that we get rid of the mediation and it's a direct exchange. So I see my role in all this as, you know, as a mediator, in a sense of I want to help my students to unpack and understand all their biases and preconceptions when encountering this cross-cultural direct communication. And I want, you know, I know it's very difficult to get rid of our biases. But we should be in that process continuously. Not because it's difficult, we should abandon the adventure, no? So we should try to better understand in, you know, explicitly and aware of our biases.
I love how you brought up the whole idea of like direct exchange. I think we don't think a lot about like the mediating of information from one party to another, because I was thinking just about how my oldest mom is Wendy. I've been taking lessons with her since March, and to learn from her specifically about like, her difficulties with continuing high school because education for Guatemalan women is so difficult because of these really large cultural norms that dictate limitations for women, but to learn from her about how she is now actively continuing her education, finishing her last year of high school, and has plans to study literature at the university level. I think that's so powerful, much more so than reading in a textbook about the percentage of women that fail to like continue their education past the age of 12. So I think that's something so important. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I think we've also been learning so much in Project Olas about the impact of COVID-19 for specifically marginalized communities, especially with the community in Guatemala City that we work in partnership with. We launched, as Rebecca mentioned, the start of COVID, since there was such a severe national shutdown, Olas moms, a lot of whom support their families, they're the sole breadwinners, were unable to work the Guatemala City garbage dump and were confined to their homes. So really being able to employ them for lessons, supported their whole families, but then created this outlet, this way of connectivity during such a difficult, concerning time. And so I'd love to hear from you about how you think this pandemic, COVID-19, has changed the way that you are or will be approaching social impact or sociolinguistics, since I think we talk so much a lot about how this pandemic is shifting our ideas of issues, structural change. So I'd love to hear from both of you on that side.
Impacts, for me, there has been huge impact, obviously, but at the same time, I not so much. I mean, I've been, oh, sorry, because the awareness of this interconnectivity it was so important in my approach and how I teach classes and what I want my students to know about the world. So that hasn't changed, like, the core of what I'm teaching, but in a more practical way, it has changed everything, and it has impacted everything in our lives, including how I design the community-based learning classes. For community-based learning pedagogy, it's so important, the idea of closeness, like getting to know people face to face in their community and working with them in their community. And now suddenly we have social distancing, and then, like, this nature force, Project Olas, comes and says you can have that via internet. So I'm integrating Project Olas. I think is like, the perfect conjunction of circumstances. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'd like to actually give a shout out to Project Olas for making it work, and y'all continuing your work and being intentional about it. I think, I've been working with youth for a while, and it's been mostly in Columbia Heights here in DC and Hyattsville, Maryland, and it's very much in person. Like what Professor was saying, community building is one of our cores, and so with that, it has always meant being in person, like being in the neighborhoods, being aware of what's going on in neighborhoods, right? Which definitely impacts our kids. And it's been really tough. I mean, it's been really tough on many people. But when I see my kids who are mostly low income, mixed immigration status, basically rely on school lunches, it's been really challenging, and it's been a lot to process with them, for sure. And so COVID changed a lot of things, but I think if anything, it highlighted the huge inequities and injustices that have been happening in this country and globally. And I think that, in conjunction with Black Lives Matter, which also impacts a lot of our youth and our communities, and even communities in Central America and other parts of the world, I think that it really just is another huge prompt for us to actually do something and change things, and really make sure that it's not just a conversation now, but it's a conversation throughout, right? Whether that's curriculum, program development, going to class and learning about it, and then taking those learnings outside that space. And that's actually a great opportunity for you all to speak with your moms and learn about, like, what are some of those, what are some of their ideas around addressing these challenges too? What are the challenges in their own communities that they're facing even more now that COVID is here? Because, it's impacted them for sure. So I think it's continue to have those dialogues and taking that to your campuses and really trying to use those tools and that privilege and leverage that to create a lasting impact.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Diana said about how the virus has amplified everything. It's unbelievable. But if you see the elite, the very privileged ones are the ones who can still move around. I mean, mobility for them didn't change. They jump into their jets, you know, and they fly all around the world, polluting everybody else's planet, but they can do that. Migration, you know, the constraints to this human right of moving, it has even been more constrained because of the virus. Like everything has been impacted in such a degree, to the worst and to the, you know, to increasing that gap even more. No, so I think it's a huge opportunity to reflect on our world and see in what direction we want to go. You know, not to lose the opportunity, for sure. And as you said, Diana, this is not just temporary. This is not just, oh, pandemic, and then it's over because we get the vaccines and the conversation is over. I think it should be long lasting. Yeah.
Yes, totally agreed. And I think this is like a great point for you all to have those conversations with your moms, because along with those challenges, like you were saying, Professor, there's almost so much sign of resiliency within our communities. And so you can see how people are like, you know, really being creative in trying to survive, and you know, maybe they can't, and in Central America, a lot of the spaces are social. Working is social. You go to the supermarket, it's all social, it's open, right? And so I think it's all those things. I'm sure if you have conversations with your moms, you'll learn so much about the resiliency that's been behind navigating that situation, and how people are, in spite of that, participating in Olas and teaching and sharing their love and wisdom with other folks and within their own, while holding up their own communities.
I think that's such a powerful message, to really recognize that resiliency. And I've had conversations too, specifically surrounding like the disproportionate impact of COVID, and then with Black Lives Matter movement, how we have to recognize like the resiliency of a community, but then be able to move past and be able to see how we have created structures that force upon those communities to be resilient and to make do with it. And so I'm glad that you brought up having these like sustained efforts to go beyond just a conversation, to really be able to move past how we can use our positionality to create change. And what advice would you say on how to push past just conversations, since a lot of times we have these wonderful talks about very meaningful subjects, but then there's this breach between the conversation and the action? What would you say about merging them together so that we really are having this day-to-day commitment to what we speak about?
That's a very good question. I mean, going from talking to action, no? And that's I think the goal for all of us, and something that really puzzles us all the time. And I always have this concern about well-intended people, you know, like all of us here sitting down talking about this, we have the best intentions in, you know, helping and doing something for the better good, but it is not easy. And I think Diana is touching exactly the point when she says talk to them, listen to the mothers, and in Guatemala, and my goal when teaching community-based learning classes is making sure that my students don't adopt this savior complex, you know, this idea that we are here to save the world, and understand that we have a position in that very unequal global economy, and that we are not saviors. We as an American, you know, as Americans, we need to recognize that we are not here to save the marginal communities from themselves, from their circumstances, actually we are the ones creating those disparities, and only changing us, knowing our role and our involvement in these unbalanced global systems, something can be changed. Yeah, I think, for example, you guys participating in Project Olas, you guys need to know about what happened in Guatemala. Guatemala is not in the situation the country is right now just because, well, it happened. We have an involvement in that. And knowing the history and knowing the specifics is really, really important, I think. It would be very easy, no? I mean, from the image we have for the country from the media, the movies, any shows on TV that they show this very poor, corrupted country with very backward indigenous communities, but also like banana republic with very corrupted government, etc. And so I think it's important not to know about the history of modern Guatemala. Guatemala was in the process of democracy, and in 1954 Guatemala had elected a democratic president called Jacobo Arbenz, and he was elected because he campaigned for land reform, and Guatemala was owned by United Fruit Company, ¿verdad? So the CIA and the government, the US government, actually there were two brothers, the Dulles brothers. The CIA director was Alan Dulles, and his brother was the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. They just launched a coup d'etat in Guatemala, and they took over, and from that coup d'etat to the 80s, just a succession of dictatorships supported by the US government, dictatorships that were committing atrocities against the population, and there is a well-known genocide committed in Guatemala very recently in the 80s. I was alive when this was happening. You were not, but I was. so I think Olas has like an amazing position there to break down those barriers and create direct connections, and understand why there is this huge socioeconomic divide between the US and Guatemala, for example. Yeah, that is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, working alongside communities, even working in communities that aren't my own, especially working with communities that I don't identify with, I think that historical context is so crucial. Dr. Moreno, it really is, it makes a difference knowing what policies are in that area, how that has changed, who the local leaders are, right? There's so many community leaders who have already been doing the work that a lot of these organizations are doing. And so how do we learn from them? How do we give them a space for partnership, right? And figuring out what their institutional knowledge is from the space, learning from the young people in the area. There's just, when you're meeting with your moms, that's maybe, I'm not sure how long the sessions are, but that's a one point in their whole experience, right? After they leave your session, they're navigating a whole space with so many histories, oftentimes violent, oftentimes hurtful, and then other moments of joy, right? Where they've built community and built those really unique moments that you might not know about unless you really do your research and educate yourself along those lines. I think another thing is to listen. I think a lot of the times, especially in education spaces like mentoring or tutoring, sometimes, folks want to come in and they want to say, I have my tutoring plan. I have this is the knowledge we're going to learn today. This is what we're going to do. And sometimes it just helps to just sit back and just listen and have a conversation and truly pay attention to what is being said and truly remember the importance of that community, right? When I was working with the Key Latch programs, it was a really large Dominican and Puerto Rican community. And as soon as we sat back and listened, we heard the different dialogues that were happening around, a lot of the Dominican families and then the Puerto Rican families that had been there for many generations, right? And just being able to sit back and listen to that and put the pieces together, it just created this bond that went beyond the curriculum that we had for the day. And that matters more, right, than anything else. It's building that community. And I think the last thing is to be courageous. I think it's really hard sometimes to speak up, for example, in class, or to speak up in a leadership space, right, where people are making decisions or making big statements that you disagree with. But as a first gen student and a woman of color, I've learned that is powerful to be able to speak up and say, I don't agree with that. There's all this US history, right, with my country and with other neighboring countries that has really created ripple effects that have led us to this situation, right? And so I've learned to be courageous, put myself out there, and really be able to say that in a class or say that in a space where I'm like, we got to listen to our youth, we got to listen to our communities. And even if that's seen as in a certain light, being able to do that, right? And the way I think about it is so many of my ancestors have gone through so much, right, for me to not take that opportunity in that space to say something about it. And even if you don't identify with that community, that actually gives you so much leverage to be able to support someone who might be feeling that in the space, right? So I would say that, along with listening and learning, being courageous and taking action.
Because all these ideas of difference, and they are different, they have these problems, that type of bias that we have wouldn't make sense if we understand where this difference come from. And it makes total sense that the society is totally destroyed and that there is huge inequality and poverty, etc., if we know what has happened. So fighting against Orientalism, any other society and any other community would have that consequences with a very difficult, almost all the 20th century, like imagine if we had that type of experience here. So yeah, be courageous. I think it's a great advice, Diana. It's like, speak up.
Yeah, what both of you have said is so powerful. I think the courageousness and being able to lean back and listen, especially for those, like you mentioned, Diana, those who don't identify specifically with the community that is being impacted, is huge. And then Maria, what you were mentioning about historical context, I remember we talked so much about Guatemala in our class, actually when Project Olas is being launched, so that's perfect timing. But I think a lot of times we feel like we are in this such large system that we can't control or we can't create an impact. It's too large for ourselves. But what you both laid out is so powerful, in that we do have so much power, this capacity to really understand that we are within a system, but we can do much more than just.
We are the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so
yeah, we should all take Dr. Moreno's class. That's the next step in action.
And so I would urge all of you, if you're here listening to this conversation, I'm sure just as intrigued as I am about all of this, to really consider creating such a direct impact through enrolling in lessons with Project Olas. I know that it's been the most impactful part of all of 2020, especially when I consider COVID and quarantine for me. But really being able to create that cross-cultural bond with an Olas mom, have those conversations that we've been having right now during this panel, and then know that by enrolling in lessons, you're creating this way for Olas moms and their communities to have a sustainable, safe income during this really difficult time. So that's I want to leave that with everyone before we go into the part of our Q&A section. So we're going to hear from some of our audience members. Thank you for sharing them with Sarah. And the first one is from Annie from Georgetown. She actually took your class in Spanish. Yeah. And she writes, something that has always struck me about language is its inherent vulnerability. How do you think this vulnerability plays into personal growth and expression?
Wow. Yeah, in every sense, no? It's like you, as I said at the beginning, you are who you are presenting to the world, and how you interact with the world, and language is there for you, is the tool we have for that interaction. So yeah, it's one of those very difficult questions for me, because I could be talking about it for ages and going around and around and around, but I think it's, in every sense, language is fundamental for our identities and how we interact with the rest of us, with the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think related to a second question that we have from another Georgetown student, Daisy, and she asks, what suggestions do you have for Spanish learners and speakers to build our understanding of the cultural and historical aspects of Guatemala outside of our lessons? Something I've been concerned about is my Olas mom feels like she bears the onus of having to explain her culture and background to me, and I want to be able to come in with more information and just listen.
That concern is, I mean, I really appreciate that type of approach to your Olas interactions. Like, not just, grabbing your phone and listening, but being educated about what you are doing, and knowing, because you can only really understand all the meanings of what you are receiving via your phone if you have research and investigated the context. And I don't know what to tell you. Reading and watching documentaries about Guatemala, there is so much about Guatemala. Reading Rigoberta Menchu's memories, it's a fascinating place for very sad reasons and very terrible, tragic reasons, but there are so many resources out there for you guys, and I really appreciate that people are, like, not taking this as just an hour a week for practicing conversational Spanish, but it's more meaningful, it's more powerful, and it needs more investment from you guys. Yeah.
Diana, would you like to add anything about that?
Yeah, I think, reading is definitely important. I really think participating in anything that you can that's related to that, to that specific culture. I know Guatemala is really far away, but if you live near, a city where there's a lot of Central Americans, like, even like, I know COVID is a whole layer now, but like in DC, right, we have a Latinx festival, right? So being able to, like, really immerse yourself beyond and do it respectfully, right? I think that that's the most important thing, like, not appropriating or not like coming in as a savior into the community, but really taking that humble seat back and, like, being able to navigate those, those spaces with much respect. And also having conversations outside of reading is important too. Like, maybe you all can even build support groups with each other and share, like, what you all are learning, because I think that it is our jobs to, like, self-educate and to do that work, and not just on our community members. So I think, like, you all finding a way to exchange those ideas or exchange things you're learning, or even challenge each other, ask the hard questions, I think that that's going to help too.
I'm sure Club Olas is there for you guys for that. No, Noel, like, I mean, you are organizing this event. This is not that it's going to stop today. You will have like periodically things. So I'm sure you will have lots of things.
Agreed. And we have two more questions to get to from the audience before we wrap up. So I want to get those to all of you. One from Matia from Georgetown. She asked, do you think we should try and lean into the colloquial language use of the Olas moms when in conversation?
What do you mean lean on that? Like, anytime that you are using language, you need to use the appropriate, the right register. But that is something that you do with every time you use your own native language, English or whatever your native language is. Register is really important. I mean, you are talking in a specific moment, in these specific circumstances, to a specific addressee and listener, and language is never neutral. It has to do with all these factors around. In your conversations with Ola's moms, it's a very organic thing. You will find the style that you feel comfortable with, and you will realize how your interlocutor, your Ola's mom is gonna feel comfortable as well. And this is an exchange of, subtle information that we always do every time we talk to any person. So it's not particular about the exchange, the interactions in Olas. It's something that applies to everything. I understand that it might feel more, awkward in this situation because you never met that person in person, and it's like very far away from you, but don't feel overwhelmed with that, because that is something you know how to do every single day when you talk to a person. And at some point you will feel comfortable and understand what your register is, how you feel comfortable talking.
Yeah, and I would like to say, like, and I think this has hit on multiple times, like, language is sacred to a lot of communities, right? And I think that as much as sometimes we want to relate to the people that we're working with, being authentic to yourself is important.
Totally.
And I think, like, for example, in my town in El Salvador, it's like disrespectful to use certain words if you're not from that town, and I think that being kind of keen to that, which is why learning about that context and really educating yourself is important on that.
And also acknowledge that some ways of speaking are appropriate for the people who feel identified with those ways of speaking, and some other people who are outsiders don't really need to acquire exactly those ways of speaking. They need to find a space where they are respectful to the community, and they are not appropriating, as Diana was saying before. But at the same time, it's a very organic, very, very natural exchange, like where the limits are. And I mean, we might have failures in that communication exchange, but it doesn't matter. This is something that can happen every single day with any interaction, no?
I think what you both said touches the next question so perfectly. And this one is from Eva Baeza, who is a president of the Camden High School chapter of Club Olas, which is located in Maine. And she has a question for both of you as our final one to wrap up. She says, I've been taking lessons for months with my mom, Libby, and because I am not fluent in Spanish, I feel as though there are times when we cannot fully connect or break down our walls. I was wondering if either of you knew some approaches to breaking down those barriers.
Well, I'm very happy that what was her name? Eva. Yeah, is aware of that, but I don't want that awareness to become too overwhelming for her and not, block and paralyze the communication. So in any interaction, and mostly when you are learning a second language and you don't feel secure on that language, you feel insecurity, things at the beginning are gonna be awkward, but keep trying, you know, keep investing yourself in it, and immersing yourself in that community, even via the internet, via WhatsApp, via, with all this distance, and at some point things are gonna be much comfortable.
Also, body language is also really important. I think language communication goes beyond your dialect or your speaking skills. So I think being able to communicate, you know, that you really want to be there and you want to, you know, get the most out of the, or like be able to combine that experience together, or that you're happy to be there. Like you can show that through different signs, not just through, you know, the verbal. And I think being okay with when you're not communicating, right? Be okay with that.
Yeah,
yeah,
normal.
Yeah.
This is something we have to accept in our lives.
Yes. Even with other people who share your same language, like I have so many like of those moments where I'm like, oh, I don't think we meant the same thing, you know. So I think being able to be comfortable with that and be okay with it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I'd love to get your like wrap up thoughts before we finish the panel. Anything you'd like to leave our audience members with? Your insights have been so fascinating. I wish I could take notes. I'm glad we're recording this so I can look back on it, just because it's so incredible to see this, to bring together two experts in social impact and Spanish sociolinguistics, which is what we talk about on the Project Olas team all the time, but we are students, so it's wonderful to hear from experts themselves. So anything you'd like to share before we sign off today?
Just one thing, experts are experts because of experience, and you guys are experiencing every day these topics with your organization, with you know, organizing Club Olas or working for Project Olas. And so I wouldn't say that you don't have the voice of authority here. I think because you are in this, you are experts of this, and I don't know, I'm really looking forward to having Project Olas in my class, like, you know, being part of my class and having Olas moms share with me the responsibility in teaching Spanish social linguistics and integrating Project Olas, not only in the exchange, the interactions between students and moms, but also as an organization in my classroom. I think it's going to be fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Great words. And I think also continue to be learners, even if you're not taking the class, but even afterwards, like continue to listen and learn. And I would say honor your moms. Like I would like to honor the moms, the Ola moms in this space, because I think that you know, like similarly to how you all might be feeling nervous, they might also be feeling nervous in these interactions, and even then they're still sharing their wisdom with us. And so I think honoring them at all times and seeing this as more than just that 1 hour session, and more than just something that goes on a resume or that is seen as like a good thing to do, but really challenging yourself to go through the hard moments that come with that learning, that come with that listening, and that comes with maybe opening your eyes to things you didn't know, like US policy in Guatemala, in Central America, right? Like those are like acknowledging and feeling in your body when that happens, and really taking that moment to heal and then to do something about it.
Thank you both. That's such wise words, and we're so grateful to have you on this panel. It's been an honor to have you both and learn from you. And so we're going to close it out today, but just wanted to thank on behalf of all of Project Olas and Club Olas for you to be here in this space with us. So thank you everyone, to the audience members too, for being here. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night, and stay in touch with us. We have Instagram at Project Olas, and enroll in lessons. You can get a direct impact on our Olas moms right away. And so thank you so much. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.